mandates from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Probably going to start off with the obvious, the whole Ferguson thing. There's a lot of issues that is brought up by this. And really, I want to just go ahead and dive into this Ferguson thing. Now, I have my own take on the whole thing, but I think it really comes down to something much deeper, and I'm going to play a couple things, and it's 2 points of view on this whole Ferguson thing, and I want to play, and I'll give you my take on it, and let me make sure we have phone lines. Because I do want to open up the phone lines for anybody that wants to comment on this. First, I'm going to go ahead and play these 2 points of views. One's from AMTV, and the other one's from Next News Network with Mark Dice weighing in. And I'll start off with the Mark Dice one. And then after both of these clips here, I'm going to give you my take on it and my opinion about the whole situation. Then I'll open the phone lines up, and then, you know, we can have a conversation about this. I really want to get down to root solutions, root problems, and really get all this propaganda, this baiting, and basically not allow the elite to sit here and play this order out of chaos and divide and conquer. And I think that's what it's really coming down to. But let me go ahead and play these.
Joining me now, Mark Dice. He's a cultural analyst to talk about last night's verdict in the grand jury case in Ferguson. Mark, what are your initial thoughts on the verdict, as well as the people's reaction nationwide?
You know, I don't think any of the protesters are really an angry lynch mob is what they are. Read any of the evidence? I don't think they care about any of the evidence. All of the evidence clearly shows that Michael Brown was a thug, a 6'4", 300-pound man who assaulted this police officer. The evidence shows his blood was on the weapon. All the eyewitnesses, including many African Americans, show that he was assaulting this police officer moments after committing a felony strong-arm robbery. But this burning Ferguson is just really symptomatic of the moral decay of America and the educational decline, the pure ignorant idiocracy when angry mobs in multiple cities have been whipped up to a frenzy, thinking that an quote innocent man was gunned down by a racist police officer when that man was a violent thug. And his stepfather, by the way, actually ordered the rioters to burn the city to the ground. Moments after the verdict was released, Michael Brown's stepfather, literally ordered the protesters to burn Ferguson to the ground. The video clip could be seen. It was aired live on CNN. He may be found criminally and civilly liable for the tens of millions of dollars in damage for inciting a riot. But it's astounding the ignorance of the masses as this lynch mob continues to look for blood in a reparation.
We've seen hundreds of gunshots last night, cars on fire, buildings on fire, storefronts destroyed. Do you think that this type of action, how does it provide any justice for Michael Brown at all?
In the Rodney King instance, after the police officers were acquitted, Los Angeles broke into riots. Those police officers clearly committed heinous crimes. So I can understand why people were angry and upset, certainly not justifying the rioting and the looting and the actions of that outcome. But in that case, there was a clear case for an outrage. Injustice, justice was certainly not served. But in this case, all evidence shows what clearly happened. It's just astounding. What's particularly sad is the choice to announce this decision at night. They really should have held the decision until the next morning and announced it then, or even perhaps held it until Wednesday when most people would be traveling for Thanksgiving preparations. I don't know where the National Guard were. I don't know where the police were. It just appeared that the protesters had a free reign, as now more than a dozen buildings had been burned, dozens of vehicles destroyed, tens of millions of dollars in property damage. Again, not because of an injustice, but because a grand jury clearly, unanimously, didn't see any evidence that this police officer acted inappropriately, and quite contrarily, was heroic in defending himself against this enormous thug, whose own mother, by the way, is now under investigation for an armed robbery herself, for allegedly participating in an armed robbery and an assault on fellow family members who were also trying to capitalize off of Michael Brown's name by selling T-shirts which read "Justice for Mike Brown." She is one of the key suspects in that armed robbery and assault. So this family that he came from apparently was had a thug mentality. Again, his stepfather ordered protesters, I can't repeat really what he said, to burn this bleep down, repeating himself over and over seconds after the verdict was announced, stirring up and inciting the riots that we've been seeing.
So, Mark, before we go, what do you think is the lasting legacy of this moment in American history as we step back and look at the damage, look at the outcome? What is the legacy here?
The legacy is that the vast majority of Americans have become an idiotic, angry mob, degenerated into subhuman animals, whipped up into a frenzy. And by the way, most people who are captivated by the story around the country, who feel a personal connection with Michael Brown, literally cannot find Missouri on a map.
No, but Mark, let me jump in for a second here, because what about the growing police state in America and the blue line that is never crossed, and the brotherhood of police officers, when they come together, they protect themselves. We've seen it over the years, this military police buildup, surplus weapons being given from the Department of Defense, arming the police who are bringing these military weapons onto the streets of America. I mean, how do we contrast that with this outcome?
There's no doubt that the initial response to the outcome of the Ferguson situation was a militarized police state with sniper rifles being pointed at protesters. This unfortunate police state that we're seeing is largely being begged for by the masses of people. you and I have been covering this unfolding of this police state, the erosion of the Bill of Rights, the violation of the Posse Comitatus Act with military acting with police. We've seen police assault people for simply videotaping interactions with the officers. So we have seen this growing situation, this out of control mentality on both sides. The general public are getting more and more ignorant and out of control, and the police are getting more and more arrogant and more powerful and more militarized. And this may ultimately clash in a Ferguson type of a situation across cities around the country, which may finalize this Orwellian police state, which has been beta tested for years now, which looks like it's unfortunately getting ready to have the final phase rolled out.
All right, Mark, once again.
And that was from Next News Network. And, you know, he touched on a lot of points I'm going to get into, and I think they're major points to be discussed. And I think I'm going to go deeper into some of the issues that weren't discussed in that. Give me a second here. When you look at this, it's one of those issues that what's going on is wrong and right at the same time, and I'll get deeper into that, but I do want to play this clip from AMTV, and this is Christopher Green's take on it, the shocking truth about Michael Brown and Ferguson riots.
Alternative media television. And this is the shocking truth about the Michael Brown verdict, the shooting, the debacle, the riots, violence in the streets, the setting ablaze of local QTs, Little Caesars. Kind of interesting there. It's metaphor for the fall of Rome, now the fall of the new empire here in the United States of America. And all of this information may come as a surprise to a lot of you that are so myopically focused on the division, the race war, the fragmentation of the Obama administration to really see the big picture. Ask yourself the question, why has there been so much focus on Michael Brown? Why has the mainstream media, corporately owned giants, whores like CNN, you know, Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon wearing their scarves in the streets of Ferguson, egging on the riots? Why has there been so much focus on it? Why won't the mainstream media leave it alone? Why are race baiters like Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson helping to propel the riots, saying that this is only the first round, that even though a grand jury has decided that there was no probable cause after looking at all the evidence, a group of people that made up not just Caucasians, but also African-American jurors, why would they continue the hate? Why would they help promote the violence? Think about it for a minute. If you do, you'll come to the conclusion that this has all been orchestrated by the Obama administration and the oligarchy that he represents for a reason. This is a part of the master plan, the divide and conquer strategy, the fragmentation of the American people to create disunity. It's a part of the agenda. You see, the Obama administration and the people that he represents knows that focusing on race and race baiting weakens the American people. It takes their eye off the ball and focus from real criminal activity occurring in Washington, D.C. today. Namely, Obama's illegal, lawless, and anti-constitutional action, unilateral action on illegal immigration, where he authorized himself up to 5 million non-Americans in the United States. It takes your eye off the ball of illegal and murderous wars in the Middle East that Obama has continued and started anew in places like Iraq and Syria with his airstrikes and soon to be announced even more ground troops. It takes your eye off the ball of multi-trillion-dollar bank bailouts orchestrated by the financial elite in this country that own the President of the United States and people like newly departing rat, Fast and Furious Attorney General Eric Holder. Notice how the rats are now leaving the nest. That's why it's been a part of the agenda. That is why there's been so much focus on Michael Brown. You see, the real victim in this case isn't Officer Darren Wilson being unfairly treated by the media, although that is all arguable. It isn't even Michael Brown. The real victim in this case is America. It's the American people being marginalized by the regime that makes up this tyrannical government. These criminals in Washington, D.C. that continue to act lawlessly, as the president did just a couple of days ago, on immigration, bypassing Congress, our branches of government, the Senate, both houses. That is why they have launched this mass smoke and mirrors distraction campaign, to create disunity and to weaken the American people. You know, we shouldn't be focused on race. We shouldn't be focused on black versus white, Hispanic, Asian, purple, polka dot. None of that should matter. We should focus on real problems, real issues. You know, a light bulb should have gone off last night when you saw the riots in Ferguson. The president said that, you know, Americans should follow the law and they shouldn't riot, even though he doesn't, and he is obviously an unlawful president and bypasses the law on a regular basis. A light bulb should have went off. You know, if hundreds, if not thousands of people will rally in Ferguson and across the country over a race issue, even when the evidence overwhelmingly points that Darren Wilson was defending himself, and it was actually Michael Brown who was a suspect and perpetrator, according to the evidence looked at by a grand jury, imagine what would happen if the American people rallied around real causes, real problems, and real issues like some of those that I just mentioned. Imagine if thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of people rallied in Washington, D.C. to protest the illegal wars, the multi-trillion-dollar bailouts, the immigration bill that just bypassed Congress. Could you imagine what Washington, D.C. would look like? It would make Ferguson, Missouri look like a speck of sand, small in comparison compared to what we were really capable of. It would be the real American Revolution, and there would actually be real change. You know what the President of the United States pitched to the American people in 2008. Just imagine it for a minute. You see, it's important that you don't get caught up in the right-left paradigm, or it might be reversed depending on how you're watching this, and that you don't get caught up in the distraction campaign that makes up this race baiting of corporately owned media giants like CNN that work for the same president, who works for the same large corporate criminal interest that makes up the oligarchy of royal families in Washington, D.C. today. Again, the banks and high finance own the politicians who own the media and convey whatever narrative it is they want to control the American people and to move the sheep a particular direction. And that's what's amazing to me, folks, is how easily manipulated the American people are over a race issue. They will act. They will riot. They will protest. They will set buildings ablaze over race, but completely overlook these other issues. And there's a reason for it, because it's being pushed by our system. It's being pushed by our government, this criminal leadership that are in control, that are in power, that own the system itself. It's time the American people change that. It's time that the American people think for themselves. Take a lesson from our founding fathers, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, 1776, and focus their real energy on the real problems, the lawlessness and criminal activity occurring in Washington, D.C. today at the highest law and level of the land. Focus your energy where it really counts and where it really matters. And imagine what could happen. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting and in your face. This is the real, shocking truth about Michael Brown. Please share it with your friends and family. Peace.
AMTV on YouTube. Now, originally I was just going to play those two clips, which that's all the clips I am going to play, but I do want to read a statement from Pharrell Williams. You may know that He's a producer. This one out of theroot.com. Pharrell Williams, why aren't we talking about Michael Brown's bullyish behavior? So here's another take on the whole Ferguson thing. Grammy award-winning producer Pharrell Williams has previously gotten flack for his comments on race, such as when he told Oprah that the new black doesn't blame other races for our issues. But that didn't stop the singer-songwriter for voicing his thoughts on Monday's grand jury decision in Ferguson, Missouri. Although he said he didn't want to get in trouble, in an exclusive interview with Ebony, the star wondered why there wasn't more discussion about why Michael Brown exhibited the behavior he did in the convenience store, which Williams described as bullyish. It looked very bullyish. That in itself I had a problem with, Williams said, referring to released surveillance video that allegedly shows Brown forcibly stealing cigars from his store shortly before he was fatally shot by Officer Darren Wilson. Not only with the kid, but with whatever happened in his life, for him to arrive at a place where that behavior is okay. Why aren't we talking about that? And he goes on to state that, that he still believes that Officer Darren Wilson should still have been punished. Now, I really don't know the truth, because you do have conflicting statements. Evidently, at least, according to the grand jury, there wasn't enough evidence to indict him. I don't know the facts. That's something that, unfortunately, the people that truly know are people that witnessed it, whether they're telling the truth in any statements or whatnot. The ones that witnessed it, and the officer and Michael Brown, those are the only people that really truly know the truth. And whether the witnesses are telling the truth or not, and that's beyond my knowledge. So let's really get down to the issue. We do have a growing police state. We have officers trained in a way that before, for law enforcement to pull out a pistol or, a gun was a major thing. You just didn't pull out a gun and point it. Now, there are some instances when they were dealing with, the moonshiners, Al Capone, the bank robbers of the day, people that were armed that they were going after. In today, we see them pulling guns on people they're pulling over for a traffic violation. They look suspicious. You look suspicious in your costume and your flashing lights, okay? It's one of those things that our law enforcement today is more of a combat group than a peacekeeper group. This is a major issue when it comes to the shooting. And we have more clear, precise, plain evidence of other crimes by law enforcement where they have shot someone or brutally beat someone up. We don't see the riots over that because it's being controlled. And a lot of these people are just out there to be a part of it, unknowing what they're really truly doing. And what they're doing is exactly what the government wants. This plays into the order out of chaos. And how this plays into it more than, let's say the whole planned march that Adam Kokesh had on D.C., armed march. He had a precise message. He had a clear message that wasn't just based on revenge. It was based on the ideology of being free. You're a free person. And that people that abridge your freedom are the ones that are committing crime. What they're saying is we don't care what any evidence shows. We don't want to get into the evidence. We've convicted him in our mind, so we just want revenge. And it's really just it's a controlled, directed revenge rage that's going on. They're basically being used to justify the police state, the militarization of the police, the tanks. And doing it for the wrong reason only furthers that. Now, if there was video evidence, there was clear evidence, there was, the witnesses are all saying the same thing, and, it's not inconsistent, and there's clear evidence that he did it, that there's footage out there that he just maliciously shot this kid. And they were going out there and they were actually wanting justice. Or if the evidence come out that, the kid attacked him, tried to take his gun, and he was able to defend himself, and then he was indicted for it, and the people came out and supported it, that would be justified. But what we have here is a very misguided anger going on. And a lot of it's being done for, I believe, political motive. And I think while all this going on, it's going to further the police state. And it's also going to allow Obama to push more of his agenda along. What has the news been the past couple days? The burning of Ferguson, the attacking rioters of Ferguson that attacked InfoWars, didn't physically attack InfoWars that I seen, but they did attack Fox News. From what I heard, CNN packed up gear and got out of town. At least that's what I heard. I haven't 100% confirmed that there. But from what I've heard, there's been a lot of people that packed up and left town. They didn't want to be there during it. We even see citizen journalists being attacked. We see racism in some of the rioters that are going after any white people they see after shit got out of hand. But it's all misguided. And what's going to come out of this? Well, let's look at the least of the possibilities, meaning this is what's at least going to come out of this. the least that's going to come out of this is you're going to have a further militarization of the police, and Obama is going to push more of his agenda while all this is going on, probably using executive order. I'm sure Congress is using this to their advantage to push things through. And it's going to be the big government, Republicans and Democrats working together, and even some of the so-called small government Republicans and Democrats, they're going to fall in line while all this is going on because people aren't paying attention. What the worst thing that could come out of this, which I don't see it happening, and I've heard a lot of discussion about this, and I don't see it happening, but I'm not going to say it can't. And that's the Civil War. I think in a way we're in a cultural civil war right now. We have people that are somewhat informed to informed that are trying to figure out peaceful ways to some type of solution. Some of them I think are still misguided. My personal opinion, because I do see some of them that really do want nothing but peace. They are peaceful people. They're not going to be in a riot. They're not going to stir up violence. But when they see a problem, they always call for some type of governmental solution, whether it be, the United States government, state government, or United Nations even, the world government, basically. I think that's misguided. Personal opinion, agree with me or not. It's one of those things, though. They're gonna be able to pass things where I don't think a civil war will be needed. They'll be able to bring martial law, and look how they were so easily able to lock down towns. Let's say Boston during the search for the Boston bombers. They were pretty successful during Katrina at confiscating guns and kicking people out of their homes even when they weren't in danger, except for looters, which they justified taking people's guns. We have people running around here looting with guns, so we're taking everybody's guns. The guy that just yep, I got my shotgun with me. I'm in my boat because my house is underwater. Oh, nope. You're going to have to hand that over. Now we see this going on. What's really going on here? It seems that they're really wanting this to last a while. Again, smoke and mirror type thing, as Mr. Green was talking about. They're going to use this to its full advantage, and then they're going to crack down. And I guarantee you, when they start cracking down, it's really going to be all of the unaware people that have joined in with these rioting. All these people from maybe, some of the Communist Party agitators that were inciting violence, that were caught inciting violence, some of the other groups out there inciting violence, they're going to be out of there. They're not going to be there when the crackdown starts. And let me look for this. a second here. Okay. This is what I want to read here. I found it. This one out of westernjournalism.com. Revealed Obama met secretly with Ferguson protesters and told them something unbelievable. And this was, when was this? November 18th. Tensions in and around the troubled town of Ferguson, Missouri, are rising sharply in anticipation of the release any day now of the grand jury report on the police shooting that left Michael Brown dead of multiple gunshot wounds. Responding to calls from protest organizers, many outsiders have been gathering in St. Louis area, planning the response to what some believe is likely outcome of the grand jury's lengthy investigation, no indictment of police officer Darren Wilson, which that came true. Now it's been revealed that on November 5th, the day that Democrats fully realized that midterm elections were a blowout of their party, a number of the high-profile protesters met secretly with President Obama and MSNBC host Al Sharpton from the Daily Mail. It was a meeting, the Gateway Pundit notes, was not included on the president's daily schedule. Sharpton told the New York Times that Obama urged the group to stay on course. While that previously undisclosed meeting may have been the first time Obama himself met with protest organizers in a role reminiscent of his community organizer days, it certainly wasn't the only time a top-level Obama official made a point of getting together with those demanding an indictment of white cop Darren Wilson. In August, Attorney General Eric Holder personally went to Ferguson with top Justice Department officials to talk with community leaders protesting the Brown shooting, as reported on Time.com. Quote, Holder, who was joined in Ferguson by Acting Assistant Attorney General Molly Moran and other Justice Department officials, expressed gratitude to those working in the area to keep tensions cool and amid the daily protests. During brief statements on Wednesday, Holder said he understands the mistrust for law enforcement the people of Ferguson have expressed, while also sharing personal interactions he has had with officers throughout his life. The county seat of Clayton, Missouri, where the grand jury is considering the case, has been targeted by protesters who vow to shut the city should Wilson not be indicted on criminal charges for the Brown killing. Many residents and officials in the region fear another wave of rioting similar to the one in August that led to the burning out of multiple businesses if the grand jury decides not to charge Wilson. We are bracing for that possibility. That is what many people are expecting. The entire community is going to be upset if Wilson is not indicted, said Jose Chavez, 46, a leader of the local Latinos in Action Group. And as noted at the GatewayPundit.com, agitators getting ready to take to the streets once again are not ruling out more violence and looting of the kind that followed Michael Brown's shooting death. So that out of Western journalism, you can't tell me that they're not manipulating this and using this. That's why you meet with the protesters like that. And, you know, I think it makes it more obvious when you don't put it on your daily schedule. You just kind of make it a thing that you're going to do and not talk about. Phone lines are open if you would like to call in and comment on this. Feel free to do so. 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. But what I'm kind of wondering, which I think I've made some of the connections, but I'm not going to say it for sure 100%. But I believe that some of the community organizer people that were trying to control Occupy Wall Street, which I think the reason it failed is they didn't have complete control. I think these are the same people that you're seeing help organize all of these riots and protests. You know, his stepfather getting up there going, burn this bee down. He might have sparked it, but it was already lit. He just fueled the flames. He sparked that explosion that led to the rioting and the looting and the burning of buildings. And these are local buildings. These are people that live in the community's businesses. You know, they burned down, you know, a barbershop. This whole thing about, you know, it being a race riot, and well, yeah, because it's manipulated into a race riot. This really has nothing to do with race. It has something to do with how police use force nowadays. I don't know anybody that, if a cop gets behind them going down the road, goes, "Oh, I feel much safer." You know, I don't know if anybody calls in. Let me know if, you know, you feel safe when cops get behind you. You go, "Oh, now I'm safe." No, you go, he's going to try to pull me over for something. I just know. He wants to pull me over. So I was going 2 miles over the speed limit. Great, you know. Really, you're going to pop me for that? Not all the time do they, but I don't think you start feeling safer when they get behind you. Definitely when, with the flow of information now, we're able to see how bad it's gotten. And I'm not going to discount racism that has existed here in America. I'm not going to discount in the past that, yes, you know, black people would experience the racism. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist now either. But when you have these so-called leaders constantly coming out, anytime that a white person or someone that might even look white is involved and a black person was shot or killed, it's automatically because he was black. No, it's because there's bad people and good people. And whether it's black on black crime, white on white crime, black on white on black, Hispanic on black, Hispanic on white on Hispanic, on Asian, it doesn't matter. We got to stop treating it that way. You know, I've talked about this before. Until we start going, it was a person harming another person. Point blank period. That's it. It's not It's not a black person or, harming a white person, or a white person harming a black person, or Mexican or Asian or, Middle Eastern. When we start going, a person harmed another person, when we start bringing it down to what it truly is, when someone has wrongfully harmed another person, then we can actually start getting down to maybe some of the roots of the problem. But the elites, the people that are running the government, the people that are basically trying to run the world and succeeding at many levels of doing that, they're not going to just allow it to happen. This has to be a conscious effort by everybody. This is where you have to become that change. And as long as you feed into that, yes, someone might have hurt someone because of their racist beliefs. But whether you have racist beliefs doesn't always determine if they're going to harm someone of that race. That's not the issue. The issue is the point that you take the decision to abridge someone else's life, their freedom, their chance to prosper, their property. When you threaten their life, that's the issue. That's the root problem. To make that decision to cross that line. Because everybody gets upset. Everybody has someone that they just dislike, but they don't harm them. And a lot of people that get so angry and get to that point and then brush it off and move on with their lives tend to be a little bit happier. And I think that's what society is lacking, is the knowledge to be a preserver of yourself and your humanity. When they get to the point where they find violence to be acceptable and abridging other people's rights, freedom, and property is acceptable, and they don't turn back from that's when you get to the point where you're either going to end up dead or in prison or in some type of detainment. Even if there was no government. If you take the conscious effort to harm others or their property, eventually people are going to stand up to you and it'll be your life. And this is something that I personally know of ex-drug dealers and people that have gotten out of the gang. It's one of those things where they say, unless you allow yourself to start thinking for yourself, to really go, where is this life going to lead me? And you take that effort to block that from your mind, then you're taking that effort to basically seal your fate. And it's not about dealing drugs. They said it's not about dealing drugs. It has nothing to do with dealing drugs. It's because of the black market of the drugs and who the people you have to deal with. Not knowing who you can truly trust. And that's what leads to the violence. Because now, if you're caught selling, you're a criminal. You can be imprisoned. So now there's a secret that has to be kept. And that's where the violence comes in. You have to be that change you want to see in the world. Okay, I didn't get any callers, so I will be moving on here. I did have something. I wanted to play. Okay. Now, I've been hearing a lot of talk on the whole amnesty issue. And I heard an interesting one. And this was from Stefan Molyneux. And where are we with time? Ooh, we're kind of cutting it close. I'm going to go ahead and play because I planned on playing it. Had a little mix-up at the beginning of the show. No big deal. I'm going to play this, cover it a little bit after I play it, and then we'll jump into a couple more articles and then close out the broadcast tonight. But I heard Stefan Molyneux on Obama's executive order, immigration, amnesty, and contradictions. He broke down the speech, which I had to go rewatch. I almost can't watch Obama speak anymore. I mean, I can't get through a whole thing. I cannot get through a whole speech. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes. It just, I start listening to it and I just immediately just am disgusted. I can't trust him, and it's one of those things where even a lot of TV programs, movies, definitely, I pick out propaganda in all of them. Whether it be right, left propaganda, I can pick out the propaganda in them. And when I say right, left, I mean liberal, conservative, not government, and total freedom. That's completely different left, right. I think the left, right I'm talking about, they're all kind of more big government. But it's one of those things that, I don't know, I can't stand to listen to his speeches, but I finally got myself to sit down and listen to it. But I'm going to play this here from Stefan Molyneux.
So President Obama has released his plan for deferring deportation threats against 4 to 5 million illegal immigrants within the U.S. borders, based upon a variety of criteria that you can look up if you want. But what's interesting is how passionately he opens up his speech with regards to diversity. So Obama starts off by saying,
for more than 200 years, our tradition of welcoming immigrants from around the world has given us a tremendous advantage over other nations. It's kept us youthful, dynamic, and entrepreneurial. It has shaped our character as a people with limitless possibilities. People not trapped by our past, but able to remake ourselves as we choose.
Now, it's such a common trope that it's become sort of like gravity or breathing. Nobody really thinks about it. But why is multiculturalism considered to be so great? It's always praised, but with no facts whatsoever. And there are considerable facts that point out the degree to which multiculturalism is really bad. Harvard professor of political sciences, Robert D. Putnam, conducted nearly a decade-long study how diversity affects social trust. Surveyed over 26,000 people in 40 U.S. communities, and even when adjusting for class, income, and other factors, the more racially diverse a community is, the greater the loss of trust. As he writes, people in diverse communities don't trust the local mayor, they don't trust the local paper, they don't trust other people, and they don't trust institutions. He says, in the presence of significant ethnic diversity, quote, we hunker down, we act like turtles. The effect of diversity is worse than had been imagined. And it's not just that we don't trust people who are not like us in diverse communities, we don't trust people who are looking like us. Relatively homogeneous societies, according to ethologist Frank Salter, he says they invest more in public goods, indicating a higher level of public altruism. The degree of ethnic homogeneity correlates with the government's share of gross domestic product as well as the average wealth of citizens. Case studies of the U.S. find that multi-ethnic societies are less charitable and less able to cooperate to develop public infrastructure. A recent multi-city study of municipal spending on public goods in the U.S. found that ethnically or racially diverse cities spend a smaller portion of their budgets and less per capita on public services than do more homogeneous cities. How is this multicultural, particularly multilingual Tower of Babel supposed to benefit society as a whole? And why is it that only the white majority that is supposed to embrace diversity? I mean, Detroit is over 90% black. I've not seen anyone criticize Detroit for its lack of diversity, or Japan, or China, or sub-Saharan Africa, or Egypt, or Israel, for that matter. If diversity is such a good thing, why not focus on the least diverse countries and nag them to import different races and cultures? Why always focus on America, Canada, Europe, and so on? These countries tend to be more diverse than most. Why continually push diversity there? It certainly doesn't have anything to do with objectively promoting the value of diversity. Obama then goes on to say that
over the past 6 years, illegal border crossings have been cut by more than half.
It's not because of any increased or better enforcement. It's mostly to do with the fact that the U.S. economy half collapsed in 2007, 2008. In fact, despite significant increases in the budgets and manpower of border patrols, the U.S.-Mexico border is about as porous as ever. One day, people will not mindlessly accept that increasing a government budget means automatically improving an outcome. But it looks like that day was not yesterday. Now, that's an interesting kind of doublespeak that shows up in his speech as well. Obama talks about,
I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy.
This is the beginning of a fascinating revolving door of high political doublespeak. First of all, Obama talks about high-value immigrants, i.e. those with skills and significant economic value. This is designed to assuage the fears of those who are concerned about the possibility of low-skill migrants entering the U.S., perhaps squatting at the welfare trough and further breaking the backs of state and federal budgets. And this, of course, comes on the heels of studies which talk about how each illegal immigrant costs the country about $24,000 a year, but on average each, of course, only pays $10,000 a year in taxes. So each illegal really adds about $14,000 a year to the country's debt burden. You've got $14,000 by 5 million illegal immigrants who might get amnesty, and that's $70 billion. And if you think that the average full-time worker in the U.S. earns about $50,000 a year in taxes, pays 25% or $12,500 in income taxes, how many jobs need to be created to offset the $70 billion that will have to be paid if the president grants amnesty to 5 million illegal immigrants? Let's see, divide 70 billion by 12,500, and you get 5.6 million new full-time jobs. Is that really possible? Of course not. Since 2009, the U.S. economy has only added about 6 million jobs. You've got 5 million new workers. You've got 1 million work visas already granted by the Obama administration. And you can't possibly make a dent in unemployment, particularly unemployment among the poor, lower classes, with this kind of situation. So, of course, Obama has to talk about high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs so that people don't worry about people who, if you make like $24,000 a year, then you're not going to be paying any federal income taxes at all, pretty much. So he has to talk about high-value immigrants to assuage people's fear about people coming in who are going to be a drain on government treasuries. But of course, it's hard to drum up the necessary socialist sympathies for Mexican engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs, so Obama needs to reverse the imagery for the second half of his speech, and he starts talking about immigrants who
work hard, often in tough, low-paying jobs.
He mentions single mothers, well, okay, which is it? Are these immigrants high-skilled entrepreneurs who will create jobs and add value, or are they single mothers and manual laborers? Later he says,
Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law?
Well, actually, they do have a chance to get right with the law, which is to not enter the country illegally. So that's one answer. So now the entrepreneurs are not high-skilled entrepreneurs, but motel maids and fruit pickers. So this is a big problem. If he's talking about how valuable they are to the economy, then you shouldn't need to grant them amnesty. They should be able to come in pretty easily because they're high value and they're going to add money and taxes and create jobs and so on. So it's hard to have sympathy for those people. And, of course, those people would do pretty well in Mexico or other countries as well, well-educated, entrepreneurial, intelligent, and so on. But it doesn't make sense then why they'd be in the country illegally working as fruit pickers and bed makers in Motel 6s. So he's got to play both sides of the fence. Oh, don't worry. They are really great entrepreneurs, going to create a lot of jobs. Oh, but you see, they're hardworking people who have no skills whatsoever, so we need to cut them some slack. Obama then, as usual, in the speech starts playing sentimental heartstrings like a master harpist.
Are we a nation that accepts the cruelty of ripping children from their parents' arms? Or are we a nation that values families and works together to keep them together?
So here, Obama is all about keeping families together. And he also quotes scripture saying, you know, we should be kind to strangers. Were we not strangers ourselves once, and so on? Well, in his autobiographies, he talks a lot about his fairly extensive drug use when he was younger, so he actually was that stranger. Wouldn't it be easier for him to refuse to prosecute and enforce the insane war on drugs? I mean, that does almost infinitely more to rip apart families than anything related to immigration, because he's all about keeping families together, right? So why not abandon the war on drugs, which regularly puts hundreds of thousands of people in prison, a significant portion of whom are parents, and ripping families apart? Well, you know, he's only for keeping families together when those families, I guess, are going to significantly vote Democrat. Or, you know, if he wants family cohesion and family unity, why not reform the welfare system? So at least it doesn't penalize couples who have children while married. I mean, particularly in the black community, where I imagine he has some significant credibility, illegitimacy is over 70%. Has he ever chided black men and women for having children out of wedlock if he's all about keeping families together? Well, now, I'm not suggesting it is a moral course of action, but he says the idea, of course, that you can't round up and kick out illegal immigrants. Well, that's not true. Under President Eisenhower, a mere 700 federal agents were able to kick out hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants in the 1950s. It's not that hard to do, so it certainly could be done. I'm not saying it should be, but when he says it can't be done, I guess he's lying. Now, this appeal to, gosh, America was founded on immigrants, and that makes us strong and wonderful and great, as he talks about. He talks about over the past 200 years and so on, we've had all this wonderful immigration, but the most important fact, the most salient fact, the fact that is the greatest sticking point for those fearful of new waves of immigration. For most of those past 200 years in America, there was no massive redistributionist welfare state. And this is why people care about immigration, you know, which in a free world is just called moving. Why do people care about immigration? They care about immigration, because of the welfare state, affects their pocketbooks, affects their job opportunities. Most people don't care who comes to a country and who lives there or here, but they do care about their taxes and national debts and deficits and endless unfunded liabilities. As I mentioned, illegal immigrants cost about $24,000 a year, contributing about $10,000 a year in taxes. So $14,000 deficit per immigrant has to be paid for by someone, somewhere, somehow. And given all of this kick the can down the road deferrals of democracies, it's likely that our children or grandchildren will have to pay some multiple of that $14,000 deficit, counting interest and inflation. What happens when huge waves of non-English-speaking immigrants in particular come into a town? Well, I mean, it's pretty expensive to have government schools that have to deal with a lot of different languages. Native English speakers, you see the property taxes go up considerably, so that multilingual teachers can somehow struggle to teach classes full of children who speak some language other than English. Multilanguage schools are going to spend less time teaching kids in any particular language because they have to try and teach children in many languages. Thus, English speakers are going to end up paying significantly more for a significantly worse education for their children. That's not something they're going to want to do. Because of the welfare state, it's a different situation. Yeah, most people don't care who moves where on the other side of town, but most people do care who, in effect, moves into their house and starts eating at their table and taking their food and playing loud music late at night. The modern welfare state has put us all in the same house, so to speak. So, yes, it matters. Now, another aspect of Obama's speech that I think is fairly important is this basic reality: he's creating a Democrat-dependent class of political serfs. So he's only deferring deportations for 3 years, starting early next year. He's not providing an amnesty that would free immigrants from any particular political allegiance. Now, whether non-citizens can vote, well, it's being toyed around with in various political venues. It used to actually be the case in the 19th century. Municipalities would attract immigrants.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. He goes on in that, but I think what I wanted to point out was the hypocrisy of Obama and, what he claims to be about. Now, I have no problem with immigrants coming to the country. It's not about immigrants. It's about them using illegals for a political tool, giving them benefits that come off the sweat off your back. You end up paying, and like he was saying, it's a $14,000 deficit that you take for each illegal that you commence to come into the country illegally, give them this temporary amnesty, and then they can get benefits. And about the voting thing, well, it's pretty simple when a lot of states have gone against IDs. So, well, now you got this temporary amnesty. What do you think a temporary amnesty is going to make illegals that have a chance to, vote in the system, where you think they're going to put their allegiance? Well, if the Democrats will give us amnesty, well, the only other option you would have is, well, if the Republicans start going, hey, we'll give you amnesty if you vote for us. Which I could actually see the progressive Republicans deciding to go that route. And again, I have no problem with immigrants. It's when they steal money out of my paycheck to pay for someone else. That should be a voluntary interaction if I decide to donate, which I donate. I'm not stingy to the point I'm not going to, donate or help someone out. But it makes it harder when I'm already having money stolen out of my paycheck to pay for other people. And then when I have to turn around and watch people that have food stamps, get all this assistance, free housing, and they just goof off with their life. They take absolutely no responsibility. And I know that I have money taken out of my check that gets to pay for things like that. Taxation is theft. And government has a monopoly on force, which they will come to your door with guns if you don't pay that voluntary tax. You don't have ownership of your property that you think you do. I bought a piece of property in a house. No. Paid a lot of money for something that you will forever have to pay a tax on as long as government exists. You rent your property. You pay for it and then you rent it. You buy it to rent it. And there's been people out there that have brought something to my attention, and it comes down to looking at things like titles. They go, do you actually get a title? When you look at your supposed title, it's a certificate of title stating that a title exists for it. And the certificate of the title is in your name. Basically saying that you don't own it, but you get the opportunity to own it or drive it. Because at any time, we can tell you can't. And you want to know how bad this has gotten? Now, in the medical field, they basically can try to rule that you are not safe to operate a vehicle or a piece of machinery. And I've had to deal with this with my grandfather, and the VA basically out of nowhere deciding, hey, we're going to keep questioning him about his driving. And basically, I think what they rather do is see him in a nursing home. That way they can personally just forget about him. Once he's in a nursing home, they just got to deal with it. I really think that our medical field is becoming very tyrannical in itself. Remember, they practice medicine. They don't exercise medicine. They don't produce medicine. They practice medicine. And you can't sue these people if they're wrong for malpractice. I think you had a cold. Here's medicine. It didn't work because I don't have the cold. You misdiagnosed me. Too bad. But at the same time, they'll be used to take your driving rights away, or your gun rights away, or your children away. There's another one here. And I've talked about this multiple times. And I've seen another one. It doesn't amaze me, but it's kind of sickening to see this still going on. And let me bring it up here, if I can find it. And this was actually about another child being taken from parents. And hopefully I can find it here. Give me a second. I think I might know where it's at. My internet has been a little bit slow since we lost power the other night. Trying to remember where I seen it at. Might take me a second here. I just had it on my screen. This is pretty bad. I don't know where it could have went. was thinking it was on Next News, but apparently not. Now I can't find it. Great. But we've seen it multiple times, children being taken away. And I played you clips from We Are Change talking about this. There was a 4-year-old with Down syndrome boy killed by UK Child Protective Services negligence. There was one clip he put out, social services stealing children and abusing them. But this is something that's becoming really prevalent. You see that you don't even have control over your own children's lives. You are dictated what you can and can't do with your child. You're dictated, what's wrong or right. As somehow you don't know what's wrong or right? Is that what they're saying? And I think that's what they want the children to think. It's not necessarily you. It's, do they want the children to believe that you are intelligent and smart? I think even Common Core shows that they want to make the parents look stupid by really dumbing down the children. If you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, it's kind of like that. It's where, the smart guy, shows up on the scene and people are laughing at him because of their ignorance, of their lack of intelligence. Because they will laugh in the face of reality because that better suits their own beliefs and their unwillingness to open their eyes to the real possibilities out there of what is truly going on. And I truly think that's what's going on right now in society, is the people that show some type of willingness to understand, to know, to be the people that can inspire and change society. They're laughed at because people don't want to see the truth because it might just go against their own beliefs or their own wants, most importantly. Okay, see where we're at on time. Okay, we still have a half hour. Good. Because I'm going to go ahead and play this short clip from We Are Change. And I think I played it before, but this is, again, social services stealing children and abusing them.
I've been away from the eldest for 14 months because the social services won't let me see the child. And the baby, the only time I saw my baby was when my baby was born, until they came in with police and stole my child. My name is Bhupesh Kumar Navin Chandra Patel. They make up allegations in order to take children. When I asked the judge, where in 31(1), which section does it state that a child can be taken on risk of future harm, the judge condones it and says, well, we can. But there's nowhere in law which says you can take a child. My child was thriving, never been hurt. Just because the social workers bully people, and I won't stand for anybody bullying me, my partner, or my family, doesn't give them the right to take my children. Whilst in care, my son has suffered marks, bruising. We've informed the police, but the police are not interested. But I've got pictures to show that my child has been abused by somebody in the social services network. Whether it be the social worker, the foster carer, somebody's abused my child. Basically, social services got involved pre-birth of our first son, which I can't state for legal reasons, but I can state his date of birth, which is 19th of April 2012. They got involved with malicious allegations of we might neglect our unborn child. They harassed, bullied us, intimidated us. Throughout this, they used the police to pull us over, stop and search, and it was just harassment beyond belief. They took us through the court process and put us into a secure unit, which has got cameras, and they monitor you 24 hours a day. We were told what we were doing is wrong. The midwives, the health professionals who we worked with stated our parenting is of a high standard and he was thriving for his age. From when they took him away, he's been dressed in charity shop clothes. He looks... words can't describe or express how I feel. Right, it makes me angry. They took my child based on mother having a learning disability, which the social workers lied about. This is Heart's Assessment Centre, which is Bengio, which is Hartford. Linda Jeffs, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, lied under oath. When I confronted her, we found evidence out now to suggest she claimed back £82,800 from Hertfordshire County Council. These are the people who took my child. How can the assessment be independent? And when we requested breastfeeding, they laughed. They would not allow mother to breastfeed. And this is Hertfordshire County Council. Elaine Moore. And I repeat, Elaine Moore, because I'm not scared, I will not be gagged, and this will be going out, and I'll broadcast it either way. You can't stop a mother from naturally breastfeeding, and we weren't given a fair assessment or a fair trial. My newborn child, after he was born, we do a chutti, which is a naming ceremony, which is religious. The social worker racially abused us with the help of the judge. His Honour Judge Wright racially abused me. After 3 months of my child being in foster care, he turned round and quoted, "My baby is not a baby." I stood up and called him a paedophile, child-abusing nonce, which is the truth. He never gave me any fine or anything else, so the matter, we take it as gospel, it must be true. So all I want to do is help other people try to stop social services bullying them.
That from We Are Changed. This is what 6-hour-old baby because they might be harmed, maybe in the future, could potentially might be harmed. And I did find that other one. This is what is going on in America, and it's becoming as rampant as the police abuse, the police brutality. This is actually becoming just as rampant. It's almost... I seen it where I would see articles maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. Now it's more like once a month, twice a month, maybe 3 times a month at times. And it soon will be, 2 times a week, 2 times a day, 2 times an hour, to the point where, they'll decide on who can have children, who cannot, and you'll produce for population sustainability. And that sounds so futuristic, but just look at the path we're headed down, and look at our history as humans. There's cultures where if they didn't think the baby was going to be quite good enough for society, they would kill him. So, yeah, this is actually old barbaric type nonsense. This is not a free society when you have this. But here's the one from Next News Network. Texas CPS kidnaps sick infant.
A mother's first few months with her child are some of the most important. Bonding between a mother and child has been shown to have many benefits to infants, including communication, trust, and learning. Unfortunately, in the case of 4-month-old Catherine Blaylock, she will not have that time with her mother. She's currently being held at UMC Children's Hospital in Lubbock, Texas, against her mother's will. Catherine was born with Pierre-Robin sequence, a rare condition that causes the jaw to be very small, along with a soft cleft palate. Catherine's head is also misshapen due to a skull plate abnormality named craniostenosis. Catherine's conditions after birth worsened when she began having seizures. Catherine's mother, Lori Blaylock, took her to multiple doctors trying to find answers, and she was put on seizure medication, but when one seizure caused her to stop breathing, Blaylock drove her right back to the hospital. Medical staff say they became concerned when, after blood work, Catherine was found to not have the full dosage of medication in her system. Blaylock claims she was given the correct dosage and that Catherine was losing more fluids than gaining, causing the medication in her body to appear low. Once Blaylock asked to remove Catherine to seek a different treatment center, officials denied her request. Child Protective Services took custody from Blaylock based on her ability and willingness to care for Catherine. Blaylock is fighting CPS, claiming they did not have just cause to remove her child. This is not the first case of CPS taking custody away from parents over medical issues. A girl was taken by CPS at Boston Children's Hospital after her parents had a disagreement over her diagnosis. CPS also previously kidnapped a 17-year-old boy from Lori Children's Hospital in Chicago for the same reason. Blaylock is hoping to regain custody of her baby soon and has started a Facebook page named Bring Baby Catherine Home in an effort to support her family.
So that from Next News Network, and, he pointed out other instances where this is happening, and it's becoming common. And we really see, again, the whole tyranny of the medical field again. When you take instances like Boston Children's Hospital and Justina Pelletier, it seems to appear that they're more interested in lab rats, guinea pigs, for their own evil intentions. That's what it seems like when Justina Pelletier, she got sick. But she had been sick before. She'd been diagnosed and was being treated for what she was diagnosed with, and it was successful. She was able to ice skate. But she got the flu and got sick, and they originally took her to Tufts Medical Center where she was being treated for mitochondrial disease. And they were like, well, our one doctor is now at Boston Children's Hospital, and we want you to go see him there. So they go there. Well, they asked for that doctor, but until that doctor showed up, another doctor checked in on her. Well, this doctor was from the neurological research or something to that point, area of the hospital. And before the doctor they originally came to see, that was from Tufts, that was now at Boston Children's working, before he even got a chance, which he ended up being denied a chance, this other doctor decided, nope, it's all in her head, that mitochondrial. Okay, we're not even here for the mitochondrial. They were there because she had gotten the flu and she was having a little bit more issues. So they wanted to, probably just get antibiotics or something pumped in her. Who knows? But nope, it's all in her head. The mitochondrial disease is all in her head. That disease doesn't exist. So, yeah, we're gonna treat her for mental problems. And if you followed me, you followed the story, and all the other news outlets, and it got to a point, CPS took Justina away, and the Boston Children's Hospital was supposedly treating for a mental problem. But in reality, if you followed, again, the story and seen the pictures that were released by the family, they were killing her. She went from a normal weight girl that could ice skate to a toothpick that was stuck in a wheelchair and had hair falling out. Within a year. Not even a year. Because, well, the research doctor decided that it's a mental problem, so we're going to experiment on her. Because in Boston Children's Hospital information, it said that when the child becomes a ward of the state, then the hospital can do experimental research on them. Sirens should go off right there for any parent. Hell no, I will not take my child to a place like that. That's what we really come down to. That's where we are as a society, where we have this constantly happening. Okay. We got about 15 minutes left. I do want to cover some other articles and topics here in this 15 minutes we have. I had one here from Ben Swan. I'm not going to play it, but I want people to go to benswan.com and check it out. And it's Ben Swan, Ferguson Clash is 30 years in the making. Definitely, I would check that out. Okay, I got two other articles, though, here out of Ben Swan. This first one, a lot of people are definitely hoping for. Texas could become 45th open carry state. Right now, you can openly carry rifles and shotguns in Texas, but no handguns. This could all change, making Texas the 45th state to allow open carry. State lawmakers have introduced several open carry bills affecting handgun owners. A bill introduced by State Representative James White would allow concealed handgun license holders to open carry if they want. Well, I believe it's everyone's constitutional right to be able to carry a handgun, but I believe people need to go through the right amount of training before they even start that, said Brad Bennett, a licensed concealed handgun instructor at Lone Star Gun Range in Lumbertown, Texas. Now let me point this out real quick. He says they should have the right amount of training before they even start that. A licensed concealed handgun instructor would say that. being someone that grew up around guns, what's the right amount? What's the right, amount of time that they should train? And, who's making these decisions? Well, of course, that's not in that because he's a handgun instructor, so he can make money. I just want to point that out. But here it says State Representative White, who introduced the bill, said protecting yourself is key. Self-protection and ensuring against government tyranny is a God-given right, and it's a constitutional right protected, said State Representative James White, a Republican. White said that open carry is a constitutional right for law-abiding citizens. You can't be a felon and have a weapon. We are not for that, said White. Now, I'm a little bit different. I think there's plenty of felons that should be able to protect themselves. Just because you're a felon doesn't mean that you all of a sudden lose the right to protect yourself. White said open carry deters crime. If you see someone that's packing, you're probably less likely to accost that nice young lady in the parking lot that's coming from her nursing class at night at the community college, said White. South Carolina tried to pass similar pro-gun bills that would allow citizens to open carry, but it failed last session. Hopefully Texas can pass this bill and stop the state from violating citizens' God-given right to keep and bear arms. South Carolina State Senator Lee Bright told Ben Swan that he will pre-file a similar bill for next session. Hopefully the Republican-controlled Senate won't kill it this time around. Getting that out of benswan.com by Joshua Cook. And, I again, there's felons out there. They're not violent people. They still should have the right to protect themselves. And honestly, people that have paid their debt to society should be able to have a firearm to protect themselves. If you truly don't believe someone should ever own a firearm, maybe they probably shouldn't be out of jail. Maybe they are those violent type people. If they're the violent type people. Maybe Charles Manson might not need a handgun. I think maybe there's enough evidence to convince at least 90% of the population. There's going to be some nutballs out there, but it's just amazing. Here's one that it's going to affect us in the pocketbooks here. This one again out of benswan.com. New EPA rules could be most expensive set of regulations. President Obama has unveiled a series of new regulations for the EPA aimed at cutting levels of smog, especially the types of pollution which have been linked to inducing lung damage, asthma, and other health problems in humans. The new regulations would mostly affect the power plants and factories in the Midwest, which contribute large amounts of air pollution. Currently, the EPA allows up to 75 parts per billion of air pollution to be emitted, a standard set by former President George Bush in 2008. The EPA scientists have said, according to the press telegram, they would prefer a lower standard of air pollution to 60 parts per billion. New regulations are thought to put the pollution emitted between 65 and 70 parts per billion, however. The new rules, which would not go into effect until after 2020, are estimated to cost the EPA about $3.9 billion to meet the 70 parts per billion level, but the cost is estimated to jump to $15 billion in order for companies to meet the lower level of 65 parts per billion. The administration says the cost is worth the health benefits, which would include, according to Politico, fewer deaths and hospitalizations, as well as fewer missed days of school and work because of issues related to asthma and bronchitis. Paul Billings, a senior vice president of the American Lung Association, said, according to the New York Times, ozone is the most pervasive and widespread pollutant in the country. Ozone is not killing people, but causing tens of millions of people to get sick every day. While environmentalists and health advocates have lauded these new regulations, some Republicans, as well as fossil fuel industry promoters, have criticized this plan, calling it another instance of government overreach. The director of regulatory affairs for the American Petroleum Institute, Howard Fieldman, said air quality has improved dramatically over the past decades, and air quality will continue to improve under the existing standards. It is important to note, though, that the American Petroleum Institute is an oil industry lobby group which spent $78 million to support the oil industry. Harold Wimmer, the president of the American Lung Association, said 60 parts per billion would be the most beneficial to health of citizens, and he called these new regulations long overdue. Long overdue. Okay, we used to have the cities covered in black because of all the coal burning in everybody's fireplace and everybody's stove or oven, and the Industrial Revolution. No, we've been improving. What they're doing is I can't confirm intentionally, but it seems intentionally putting a strain on the coal-fired power plants. They want to push their green agenda. They won't allow the green. Listen, I am all for green power. I want to be completely off the grid. I want, I don't want to be hooked up to the grid. I love the idea of it. And it's growing, and the technology is getting better. But allow that technology to get better and the price to be reduced before I'm being forced to go this route. What it's going to do is raise the prices on your electricity. It's going to cause electricity shortages. I just got done dealing with power outage here that shut down all the way out where I am, all the way to the city, because of main power lines that were coming into the city. First one failed, they switched to secondary, and that one failed an hour after. And that's going to be something common, but it's not going to be, they're had a power line go. No, they're going to shut it down. They're going to be like, this area is drawing too much power. We can't, exhaust that much power. And people are like, well, they can just upgrade their. They just spent billions of dollars to upgrade their systems, and they'll probably try to, and with the more profitable, electric places. But there's some that they're going to have to completely go and redo everything they just did. And they're going to opt to shut it down. And then when the price of electricity goes up, their pockets will get a little fatter because now they're not producing as much. So now what electricity is being produced costs more. They won't lose money. They're not going to allow themselves to lose money. Anybody that becomes successful and stays wealthy does it by making the smart moves of going, well, I can keep buying into all this regulation and spending all my profits to keep upgrading to meet the regulations, or I could keep my money and just shut down. You're going to start seeing some of these power plants shutting down. Eventually, with regulation, you're going to see what history has proven through overregulation and basically a socialist ran country is you're going to see people get gulped. They rather shut down, burn down their factory, and leave with their money than keep it alive for leeches to suck the wealth out of. Believe me, I want a clean planet. I want a healthy planet. I'm an outdoors person. I love being out in the woods, out in nature, away from the city. I love, nature. I want to see that. I understand, the dangers of polluting there. I understand the dangers in a lot of this. But guess what? What power plants aren't they shutting down? Oh, the nuclear power plants. When you have a lot of issues with the nuclear power plants. I know mainstream media always tries to downplay it, and I think with our abilities nowadays, I think we could build successful, safe nuclear power, but I don't think that you're going to see these people invest in it. Because I do think we're going a different route. And I'm hopeful for the new route we are going, but when it's forced upon you, it's going to hurt you and profit. Others will profit off of it. That's where the problem comes in. And hopefully technology starts catching up, kind of like it did with the LED light bulb. And catching up to the point where maybe we can get off the grid before all these prices skyrocket. Thank you for tuning in. I'll catch you this Friday. Stay tuned here on UCY for all the great broadcasts coming up next.
Good evening, everybody. As all of you know, a few minutes ago, the grand jury deliberating the death of Michael Brown issued its decision. It's now come that either way was going to be subject of intense disagreement, not only in Ferguson, but across America. So I just want to say a few words suggesting how we might move forward. First and foremost, we are a nation built on the rule of law. And so we need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. There are Americans who agree with it, and there are Americans who are deeply disappointed, even angry. It's an understandable reaction. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully. Let me repeat Michael's father's words. Hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain. I want it to lead to incredible change, positive change, change that makes the St. Louis region better for everyone. Now, Michael Brown's parents have lost more than anyone. We should be honoring their wishes. I also appeal to the law enforcement officials in Ferguson and the region to show care and restraint in managing peaceful protests that may occur. Understand, our police officers put their lives on the line for us every single day. We've got a tough job to do to maintain public safety and hold accountable those who break the law. As they do their jobs in the coming days, they need to work with the community, not against the community, to distinguish the handful of people who may use the grand jury's decision as an excuse for violence, distinguish them from the vast majority who just want their voices heard around legitimate issues in terms of how communities and law enforcement interact. Finally, we need to recognize that the situation in Ferguson speaks to broader challenges that we still face as a nation. The fact is, in too many parts of this country, a deep distrust exists between law enforcement and communities of color. Some of this is the result of the legacy of racial discrimination in this country. And this is tragic because nobody needs good policing more than poor communities with higher crime rates. The good news is we know there are things we can do to help. And I've instructed Attorney General Holder to work with cities across the country to help build better relations between communities and law enforcement. That means working with law enforcement officials to make sure their ranks are representative of the communities they serve. We know that makes a difference. It means working to train officials so that law enforcement conducts itself in a way that is fair to everybody. It means enlisting the community actively on what should be everybody's goal, and that is to prevent crime. And there are good people on all sides of this debate, as well as in both Republican and Democratic parties, that are interested not only in lifting up best practices, because we know that there are communities who've been able to deal with this in an effective way, but also who are interested in working with this administration and local and state officials to start tackling much-needed criminal justice reform. So those should be the lessons that we draw from these tragic events. We need to recognize that this is not just an issue for Ferguson. This is an issue for America. We have made enormous progress in race relations over the course of the past several decades. I have witnessed that in my own life, and to deny that progress, I think, is to deny America's capacity for change. But what is also true is that there are still problems, and communities of color aren't just making these problems up. Separating that from this particular decision, there are issues in which the law too often feels as if it is being applied in a discriminatory fashion. I don't think that's the norm. I don't think that's true for the majority of communities or the vast majority of law enforcement officials, but these are real issues. And we have to lift them up and not deny them or try to tamp them down. What we need to do is to understand them and figure out how do we make more progress. And that can be done. That won't be done by throwing bottles. That won't be done by smashing car windows. That won't be done by using this as an excuse to vandalize property. And it certainly won't be done by hurting anybody. So, to those in Ferguson, there are ways of channeling your concerns constructively, and there are ways of channeling your concerns destructively. Michael Brown's parents understand what it means to be constructive. The vast majority of peaceful protesters, they understand it as well.
At approximately 11:45 a.m. on Saturday, the 9th of August, Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson was dispatched to the Northwinds apartment complex for an emergency involving a 2-month-old infant having trouble breathing. At approximately 11:53, while still at the Northwinds call, Wilson heard a radio broadcast for a stealing in progress at a market on West Florissant. The broadcast also included a brief description of the suspect, a black male wearing a white T-shirt who took a box of Swisher cigars. Other officers were dispatched to that store. Officer Wilson remained with the mother and the infant until EMS arrived to transport them to the hospital. Officer Wilson then left Northwinds complex in his Ferguson police vehicle and drove west on Canfield towards West Florissant. As Officer Wilson was attending to his emergency call on Northwinds, Michael Brown and a companion were in a local convenience store on West Florissant. Michael Brown's activity in that story was recorded by the store's security cameras. The video shows Michael Brown grabbing a handful of cigarillos and heading toward the exit without paying. As Michael Brown and his companion left the store, someone inside the store called the police. After crossing West Florissant, the two walked east on Canfield in the middle of the street, Mr. Brown directly behind his companion. As Officer Wilson continued west on Canfield, he encountered Michael Brown and his companion still walking in the middle of the street. As Wilson slowed or stopped as he reached Mr. Brown, he told them to move to the sidewalk. Words were exchanged, and they continued walking down the middle of the street. As they passed, Wilson observed that Michael Brown had cigarillos in his hand and was wearing a red hat and yellow socks. At approximately 12:02 p.m., Wilson radioed that he had two individuals on Canfield and needed assistance. Officer Wilson backed his vehicle at an angle, blocking their path and blocking the flow of traffic in both directions. Several cars approached from both east and west but were unable to pass the police vehicle. An altercation took place at the car with Officer Wilson seated inside the vehicle and Mr. Brown standing at the driver's window. During the altercation, 2 shots were fired by Officer Wilson while still inside the vehicle. Mr. Brown ran east on Canfield and Officer Wilson gave chase. Near the corner of Canfield and Copper Creek, Mr. Brown stopped and turned back towards Officer Wilson. Officer Wilson also stopped. As Michael Brown moved toward Officer Wilson, several more shots were fired by the officer, and Michael Brown was fatally wounded. Within seconds of the final shot, the assist car arrived. Less than 90 seconds passed between Officer Wilson's first contact with Michael Brown and his companion and the arrival of that assist car. During the investigation, many eyewitnesses were interviewed by various media outlets. Several others chose not to talk to the media, but contacted law enforcement directly. Witnesses were interviewed by local and federal law enforcement, sometimes together, sometimes separately, but all statements were provided to the other party. All previous statements of witnesses who testified before the grand jury were also presented to the grand jury, whether they were media interviews or whether they were interviews by the FBI or by the county police department. The statements of all witnesses, civilian, law enforcement, and experts, were challenged, of course, by other law enforcement, by the prosecutors, and by the grand jurors themselves. The common and highly effective method of challenging a statement is to compare it to the previous statements of the witness for consistency and to compare it with the physical evidence. Physical evidence does not change because of public pressure or personal agenda. Physical evidence does not look away as events unfold, nor does it block out or add to memory. Physical evidence remains constant and as such is a solid foundation upon which cases are built. When statements changed, witnesses were confronted with the inconsistencies and conflicts between their statements and the physical evidence. Some witnesses admitted that they didn't actually see the shooting or only saw a part of the shooting, or only repeating what they had heard on the street. Some others adjusted parts of their statements to fit the facts. Others stood by original statements even though their statements were completely discredited by the physical evidence. Several witnesses described seeing an altercation in the car between Mr. Brown and Officer Wilson. It was described as tussling, wrestling, a tug of war, or just some movement. Several other witnesses described Mr. Brown as punching Officer Wilson while Mr. Brown was partially inside the vehicle. Many of the witnesses said they heard a gunshot while Mr. Brown was still partially inside the vehicle. At least one witness said that no part of Mr. Brown was ever inside the vehicle and that the shot was fired through an open window while Mr. Brown was standing outside. The vehicle and Officer Wilson's clothing and equipment were examined by various technicians and scientists. Mr. Brown's blood and/or DNA were located on the outside of the driver's door. His blood and DNA were also found on the outside of the left rear passenger door of the police vehicle. Mr. Brown's blood or DNA was found on the inside of the driver's door, the upper left thigh of Officer Wilson's pant leg, the front collar of Officer Wilson's shirt, and on Officer Wilson's weapon.
For more news, visit 8minenews.com.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.